Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. This is episode 455. We've got a great special guest. We're going to be talking about all things security around your website. If you're actually working for a client, the things you really got to understand about security, or if you've got your own website and you're looking for an expert that can give some great insights about how you can keep your site away from those horrible hacker types. Unfortunately, my co-host, Adrian, the good-looking one, and the intelligent one couldn't make it for this show. But I'm sure Brian Gills, founder and chairman of Gillware, will be the expert that we're looking for. So, Brian, can you give the audience a quick intro about yourself and about the company?
So I'm a computer scientist by trade. About 15 years ago, a group of friends and I, we started a company that essentially has been digging mostly American businesses out of data-related disasters, some of which are website in nature, but all the different ways businesses can either lose data, get data stolen. And for the last 5 years, we've been heavily concentrated on what's called incident response. And the type of incidents that we respond to are data breaches, ransomware, that type of thing.
Oh, that's great. Before we go into the main part of our great conversation, I just want to mention our major sponsor. It's been sponsoring the show for the last couple of years. Where have those 2 years gone? I cannot tell you. And that's Kinster Hosting. And Kinster only specialise in hosting WordPress websites. They're big enough to have all the technology and knowledge, small enough to still care. They host the WP-Tonic website. It's been fantastic hosting. You get Google hosting through them, but what you get from them is a great UX design. And the main thing is you get some of the best 24/7 support in the market at the present moment. And if you've got a WooCommerce website or e-learning platform, based on WordPress, your normal cheap hosting just won't hack it. You really need a better hosting provider, and that's what you get from Kinster. So if that sounds interesting for yourself or for your clients, go over to kinster.com, look around, buy one of their packages, and please tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic podcast. So, Brian, let's start off. So what are some of the things that in general you come across that are consistent patterns that people do wrong when it comes to website security in general?
Yeah, and I think it's a bigger theme than that even, but user authentication is a consistent problem. Something as simple as, sometimes when we go into an organization, we'll find that there's users that could authenticate onto their network or onto their website that haven't worked there in years, or a specialty vendor they hired 5 years ago to come in and punch up one little part of the website, still as like full-blown administrative access. And boy, you got to wonder, why. And it's just, you got to understand who are your users, what levels of permission should they have, and then you've got to work really hard to make sure that it's actually them.
I think you're so spot on, and it's understandable when it comes to WordPress, because it is a slight weakness with WordPress, is that a lot of the functionality, you really want to give them editor role, but it's just not high enough for them to do a lot of jobs. So you end up having to give them admin access. And then it's so easy if there isn't a formulated plan structure of dealing with subcontractors for people to forget, and those people to have full admin control, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not that they would do something malicious.
No.
It's that somebody else that obtains their access because they had an incredibly weak password or something along those lines.
And this is one of the things, but I have got a vested interest in this because we run a a website maintenance service business. So I've got to point out to the listeners and viewers that I have a bias here, but I do think it's better to select a company that has a track record, that has a presence in the security or WordPress community, than just going to freelance websites and getting somebody that you absolutely know nothing about apart from that freelance website as in some way vetted them, but you really fundamentally don't know anything about them.
Yeah, and on the subject of being somebody that, or being a company that has access to dozens or hundreds or thousands of other businesses' information, there's a much deeper burden to understand that, first of all, you might be an actual target. That if you are identified as a company that, if we could penetrate this company, look at all the havoc we could cause, right? So simple things like you shouldn't have the same administrative password and an administrative username on all 500 places you go. You need to, and again, if you have a staff of a dozen people, you need to have the rules in place where, no, I don't actually trust you to have strong, unique passwords on all the places you go. Like here, when you work here, the way we log in is with this, KeyPass password manager or a YubiKey or whatever the situation is. You really, unfortunately, everybody needs to know quite a bit about security these days.
Yeah, I think you made a great point there, because the other factor is your passwords for your email accounts, isn't it? Because they're after that also, and if somehow that's on the website somewhere, and they manage to crack the password, and you're using that password for your email accounts, that can be a bit of a problem, couldn't it?
Yeah, it sure can. And if in general, if you have the same password for a bunch of stuff, or you have 3 different or 4 different passwords you use at the 50 different places you have to log in, it's a huge problem, because sometimes that provider gets all the way owned and their whole database of everybody's password gets available on the dark net. And that, even though through no fault of your own, you didn't get phished, you didn't get tricked, you didn't cough up the password unnecessarily, the company that had it wasn't encrypting it in the right way, and they got their network penetrated. And now they're going to try to use that at all these other places. And all of a sudden, they're you. And you see the nightmare, when you're a successful business and you have all these good clients, and the black eye, the reputation hit that you can get when you get breached, and that breach has ramifications to your clients, it's devastating.
Yeah. So I get a lot of clients say to me, well, my hosting provider backs up my website, I've got nothing to worry about. What's the problem with that attitude, Brian?
Well, the problem, first of all, if they're paying for a high quality service like the one you just promoted, they probably are, and they're probably doing a relatively good job. But the main problem I see when I'm talking with WordPress admins, or somebody that just set up a WordPress website for a small business, and they say, yep, it's backed up, and it's backed up with this plugin, and then the problem may happen 3 years down the road. And that business owner has absolutely no idea what to do. They think a backup exists because maybe they've been paying $12 a month for one. But how do you access it? How do you download it? How do you spin up a new server or a new cloud service? Or how do I set up a new container to put it on? And okay, I finally 8, 12, 16 hours later figured out how to log into my backups and figured out how to migrate it over. And I've got to log into this, DNS thing and try to figure out how to repoint my DNS now. And this whole time, your business has been down, right? So all of this can be avoided with making sure that you do a mock restore occasionally. Once every 6 months, once every 12 months, pretend that you need to spin up from your backups. Let's see if it works. Let's see if all those integrations that you have with your, marketing automation software or your internal CRM, or let's make sure that those still function and they still can talk to those things. And let's make sure it's recent. Oh, geez, well, I have my website, but it's 5 weeks old. It's the Christmas season. I can't rekey these 200 products again. So again, do a mock restore, understand how to access it in the first place. And if you have a one-page Word document, which is a kind of a break glass in case of emergency as a business owner or a host, where if the worst of the worst happens, these are the exact steps on how we start all the way from scratch, and we know that it works, and we know that it takes an hour, or it takes 2 hours, or it takes 4 hours, because your phone might be ringing off the hook. Yeah. With people complaining. And what are you going to tell them? What is your staff going to tell them? Hey, listen, we had a major outage. We're going to be back in 57 minutes. That's a much better way to live than we're working on it and you have no idea. And when you go through that mock restore process, what you're probably going to find are issues. Maybe it turns out you need to upgrade to the gold plan with that service provider so that you have a guaranteed phone number where you're going to be talking to a human within 5 minutes. Yeah. Because you cheaped out and you went with the entryest level plan, and they guarantee email response in 4 hours in that level of service. And maybe that's not good enough for you and your clients, and you didn't really realize that until you had to go through the mock restore. You might realize that it wasn't complete, or that your WordPress theme looks a little goofy, or some graphics aren't quite right, or geez, our subdomain isn't even here. Where did that go? Oh crap, that wasn't even in the backup. You might realize your backup was incomplete or out of date, or the service wasn't good enough. So I can't preach.
Well, I think you're preaching to the converted, because at WP-Tonic we're anal about backup. Backup is the number one element of a security strategy, isn't it? So we have one backup which we take straight away and we store it, and that's our final backup. And then the other thing is, it really depends on the kind of hosting the client has. I'm personally a bit snobbish about hosting, and I think any hosting provider that doesn't provide really good staging mechanisms, so you have a staging site and then you have a production site, I personally wouldn't really host my site if it's a business critical website on a hosting provider that didn't provide a superb ability for staging as well. Would you agree with that, Brian?
Oh, of course. I mean, we usually have about 4 different versions of our websites. Different developers have their own versions they're kicking around, and there's our this is our, hey, listen, I've checked it all into source control, and now we're going to check everything out and make sure that this is our kind of beta candidate, and then boom, now let's promote it up to production. And having a solid strategy or a host that really facilitates that is huge. And when it comes to backups, you should understand where it's going. A surprising amount of backups will be backing up to the same
to the server with
same server. That's not a backup. If it's backing up to the same piece of hardware, to the same private cloud or the same piece of on-premise hardware, you're still going to be subject to all the bad stuff that can happen to that node. It needs to be a different node with a different layer of network authentication. And probably the number one problem that I see with these backups is the mechanism to authenticate in and access that backup lacks two-factor authentication.
Well, that's great. We're going to be coming back. We're going to be delving into this fascinating subject a bit more. I'm going to be putting a thing that's a bit of a bugbearer to me to Brian and see what his thoughts are in the second half of the show. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. We've been talking all things WordPress and security. Before we go on to this fascinating conversation, I want to talk about one of my other sponsors, and that's Lifter LMS. Now, if you've got a job for a client and they're looking for a superb learning management system for their course, and they want to base, obviously, being that they're intelligent, they want to base it on WordPress. You cannot really go wrong by using Lifter LMS. It's one of the most superb products that you can use on WordPress. So go over, have a look at what they've got to offer. And if you do decide to buy for yourself or for a client, their pro versions, please tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show. Now, Brian, a little bugbearer of mine. It's a little ink here. I might go on a little rant, so be patient, Brian. Is in the WordPress developer community, there's a set of developers, and also there's some plug-in software providers that provide tools to allow people to host clients' websites on Google, Amazon Web Services, right? And I think it's the road to hell myself, because I think for the right product or the right SaaS or the right service, Amazon Web Service is totally logical. And especially if you've got a powerful team that can administrate what's going on. But Amazon Web Services, they don't provide any real effective support, or it's extremely difficult. And I'm not a Linux administrator, Brian. I have many talents, but that's not one of them. What do you think about people that try and push clients for them to host their websites on Amazon Web Services?
Well, I think you make a really valid point. It's an incredibly powerful cloud platform. And, you know, every time I log into AWS, there's about 5 new features, right? So I think it's really difficult, and they've got probably 800 people that are developing that platform, right, at Amazon. So it's changing all the time. So I think the more you know about some of these cloud services, the more you realize how fast it's moving, and the less confident you are in maybe a micro-sized business or a small business trying to configure those things properly, trying to configure them properly for security. And the more difficult it might be to have, you might have a lot of those ongoing problems where you might not be able to, you know, I have roughly a dozen people with computer science degrees and a bunch of these Linux server administrators. So we would be comfortable with that type of thing. But for a lot of businesses, it might be too modular, or they may not have the ability to keep up to date with all the things that are happening.
I personally think you've got to, you know, to the savings when you take in what will happen if this developer, we part company with this developer, and then we haven't got somebody on call that supposedly has the Linux, you know, and I'm not attacking developers. We've all been there. All developers like to think they're the best developer on the market, and they think they can deal with almost anything. But in my experience, being a top-notch Linux administrator and being a top-notch WordPress developer are 2 entirely different things. But that's my opinion. So let's go on. So another thing I hear, Brian, is I hear a lot of people say, well, why would somebody want to hack my site? You know, it's a non-profit. We help orphans in northern Nevada. Nobody is going to want to hack our site. What's the reality, Brian?
Well, the reality is that they want to hack everybody. Well, first of all, the primary motivation these days, it's not like it was, 20 years ago where somebody wanted to hack your sites and throw up a JPEG of their pirate flag and get some sort of street credit in the hacker community for hacking somebody's website. That kind of thing probably happens occasionally, but these modern hackers they're coming from a place of they're organized crime and they want money. And they may not specifically target that nonprofit that serves orphans. They're targeting everybody at once. And especially with WordPress. Congratulations, WordPress. It's the #1 web platform on the planet. And they have the same burden that like Microsoft has, where it's the #1 operating system on the planet. So every hacker is trying to come up with exploits, and they will try to send these exploits off in bulk to every website on the planet. And if you're running a version of WordPress from 4 years ago, you're probably going to have a bad time, right? Because you haven't kept up with your patch management strategy. So yeah, everybody's a target, and it's unfortunate, but it's not going away. And there are a couple of quick, easy things that probably to most of your audience they're already doing, right? But do you need the default? If you've ever looked at those server logs or those audit logs, first of all, look at them and you'll be very, very scared about how frequently somebody's trying to hack into your website, often before it's even live, right? Like, wow, I just am in beta here and there's already some IP address in Romania is trying to log into my server. And you'll see all these failed entry attempts. So you can rename the WP-login or the WP-admin. You can rename those URLs, and that will get you out of some of these kind of automated attacks. Do you really want your administrative user to be called admin? Because maybe you don't want it to be called admin, because a lot of these automated attacks are going to be trying to log in as admin. And they're going to be using these databases of millions of known passwords. That's another subject you could be thinking about, making sure that you find a security plugin or you add a rule where you can't just sit there and kind of brute force. If one IP address has tried to log into your server 10 times in a row, do you really want to let that IP address continue to try? A surprising amount of websites, the answer is yes, they can just try infinitely. And they will, because it costs them almost nothing to continue to hammer you. So turn it off. And obviously, one of the things I've talked about a little bit a couple different times is two-factor authentication. So every user who's logging into your WordPress should be forced not only to have a username and a password, but have that like mini orange plugin. And I'm not here to push any particular plugins or anything, but make sure you're using like a Google Authenticator smartphone rotating digit code as a second factor of authentication. And if you're really if you're you're growing into that enterprise level and you're supporting a user with thousands of concurrent users and there's big ramifications to any problems, you might even start to consider some of these third factors of authentication. Like, if you want to log into our WordPress, you have to come from these specific IP ranges. I'm sorry, nobody in Romania, even if they had the username and the password and they spoofed somehow the second factor of authentication, we don't let people outside of these very fixed IP ranges even get to these specific URLs.
Yeah, I think what Brian's pointing out, but there's always a balance here, Brian, because fundamentally I agree with almost everything you're saying. But the thing you've got to be aware of, listeners and viewers, is as the security threshold increases, i.e. the methodologies that you're utilizing to keep the site secure, it becomes less convenient, so there's always has to be a kind of balance between. But on the other hand, if you're making a substantial living from your website, or that website If it was down, it could affect a lot of people. You really got to be looking at these kind of security questions, haven't you, Brian?
Yeah, and this is, you just stumbled on a huge topic, and all this technical mumbo jumbo that I'm rambling about, it may or may not have certain relevance to any particular situation, right? And it's all about risk assessment and risk management. And there's a couple different things you can do with risk. You can buy insurance policies or cyber insurance policies. You can hire security experts to try to defend against, things, or you can do nothing. You can just take a piece of bread and polish all your risk on it and just eat it. And if the bad stuff happens, it happens. And all three of those things are appropriate in different circumstances. But the burden for people is to think about it, think about the risk, and make intelligent decisions for how you insure or how much resource you put into this to beef up your security. Or if you shrug your shoulders and say, you know what, if this whole thing gets owned and crashes, it's really no big deal to me. Yeah, okay, well, that's fine. Then you probably shouldn't be buying insurance or spending $1,000 a month on a security contractor. And there was another thing that you mentioned, which was convenience. And everything that we do in security, it has a convenience problem. It's inconvenient to spend a bunch of money on security. I'd rather spend that money on other stuff and my family and my children's education and pay my employees bonuses. And that's pretty inconvenient. And every time I go to log into this website, I've got to have this stupid YubiKey in my pocket, and I've got to have VPN into that network because that's the only network that can get onto the thing. And I've got to have this rotating phone thing, and I've got to make sure it's all synchronized. And every time I add an employee, it's an hour of crap to get them all set up. And all of these little inconveniences are the price we pay for increased security. It's a direct trade-off. And it's important that the business owners and the board members and the executives aren't sometimes like this. You're like, hey, CEO, like you have to do these 8 things now. And they're like, oh, I'm not doing that. Well, and they need to have the opposite approach, that those executives or those business owners or those host providers, they need to be understanding the overall risk profile that they have, and they need to be making important decisions to support security when it makes sense. And they themselves cannot personally be counterculture to that. It's sometimes the IT people or the nerds in the room and the Linux administrators, they know all the things that they should be doing, but they don't have that political organizational control to make it happen.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, we're going to come to the end of the podcast part of the show. Hopefully Brian's going to agree. I think he is going to agree to stay on for about 10 minutes, which is going to be bonus content, which you can see the whole interview with the bonus content on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel, and also on the WP-Tonic website, where we will have a full transcript and all the links to some of the things we've mentioned during this interview. So, Brian, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and your company and services?
Yeah, Gillware.com, Gillware. Hopefully you never need us. Almost nobody wants to be our client because it usually means something's going sideways, but we're a great connection to have if you or your clients ever end up in kind of data related emergencies. You can find me at Brian Gill on LinkedIn. I connect with just about everybody who wants to connect with me. So that's great.
Oh, thanks, Brian. And if you really want to support the show, folks, go over to iTunes and give us a review. It can be good, bad, or ugly. And if it's a funny one, I'll probably read it out. But go over. I know it's a pain in the posterior, but go over to iTunes and give us a review, because if you're getting real value from this show, hopefully you help us out and give us that review. We'll be back next week with another great guest, with another great insights to help you make your business a success in 2020. We will be back next week. See you soon, folks. Bye. So, Brian, on to bonus content. So, I think I think the other area. Can you give? You said I said about the Northern Nevada Orphan website. Two areas where they probably want to hack your site, apart from ransoming it to you, is it's this Bitcoin business. I'm not give something because I don't totally understand why they need websites for Bitcoin actually. And the second thing is, I understand they these criminal enterprises, they like to get groups of servers or access so they can use it for DOS attacks. Is that correct? So there's two areas. Can you give on Bitcoin and DOS attacks?
Yeah, so again, ransomware is a term that everyone's heard, and a lot of people do understand, but they don't really understand where it all comes from. So couple things to understand. It's a whole bunch of new technologies and one kind of old theme kind of got together and had this ransomware baby, okay? The old themes are organized criminals have always been trying to do things to make money in nefarious ways. And since computer networks have been a thing and websites have been a thing, people have been trying to hack them. This is old hat, always been happening. But there's two new things. One is encryption. So it's easier than ever for just about any moderately intelligent person to write a little script or buy a little script or find a little script in the darknet to legitimately encrypt large amounts of files. And by legitimate encryption, I mean the encryption that they're using is real, and it is all the computing power on planet Earth for like a couple of millennia to brute force decrypt it, okay? So the encryption really, really works. And then the other one is this cryptocurrency thing, this anonymous cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, the number one feature of Bitcoin that is both good and bad, I mean, it's just a feature. It's not, it's anonymity. You know, you can move Bitcoins or percentages of Bitcoins from this e-wallet to this e-wallet without the world necessarily having much clue as to who any of these people are. And this money is transferred instantly. And once it's there, it's gone. There's no takesies, backsies. There's no full 4 or 5 days for a wire transfer. There's no briefcase full of money that you've got to bring to a drop point and the FBI can swoop in. It's an instantaneous movement of what is now a legitimate-ish currency. I mean, it's been worth money just about everywhere for a long time now. And so now these guys the bad guys have a methodology for getting paid instantly and fairly anonymously, right? So again, why does anybody want to hack anything? Why does anybody want to DDoS a website to death? And the reason is if they can demand, hey, listen, I'll stop DDoSing you if you send me a Bitcoin to this wallet. The second you do that, I'm turning it off and you guys will be back up and rosy.
Yeah. What about the mining side? That's the bit I don't understand.
You're right. Okay.
Yeah, that's the bit I don't, because they want all this server access to all these servers and that to help them mining. What is mining? Why do they?
Yeah, it's a byproduct of the way that kind of new Bitcoin gets created, and it's a byproduct of how transactions get verified, where anything with any amount of computing power can sit there and chug away and produce very, 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 at this point, very small amounts of currency to the point of even if you build the world's perfect Bitcoin miner and have all the perfect CPU and graphics cards and it's perfectly optimized to mine, it will likely not be efficient because of your electricity bill.
Oh, so you're looking to use other people's electricity bill. I got it there. All right.
But what if it's not your electricity bill? So if you can break into somebody's website and have a little piece of JavaScript that when people come to that website, it launches a little very crappy Bitcoin miner. And everybody who's visiting your website is now mining very, very, very tiny amounts. But if you did it to tens or thousands or hundreds of thousands of websites, it turns into real money, right? And it's not just websites, it's even this whole, Internet of Things where, I have this, refrigerator that is, a smart refrigerator, and it synchronizes with my Google Calendar and tells me when I need to buy milk or whatever. If they can hack into my refrigerator, or if they can hack into everybody's refrigerator, maybe everybody's refrigerator is just sitting there mining very, very small amounts of Bitcoins. And you might notice your electricity bill's a little higher, and maybe the motherboard on your refrigerator dies a couple years earlier than it would otherwise. But that's really the mining aspect of it. Anything they can do to get their code running, or if you're a hosting provider and you've got hundreds of servers or hundreds of virtual servers, if they can penetrate you, they can just install all that mining software.
Yeah.
And
am I correct? One of the problems, because you can say, well, they've installed it and it isn't a big, it's not nice, but it's not a major problem. I think the reason why it's a major problem, I just want to confirm this, is that other people are, it leaves a hole in the security which other hackers are, no. So they scan to see if this type of hack has been successful on a website, and then that leaves a little hole for other nasty people to get into. Is that correct?
What you're talking about is really inside pool. And what we find in the criminal world is that it's quite often the culprit that is doing the ransomware event, or the culprit that is doing the data exfiltration, stealing the data, or the culprit that is mining for the Bitcoins, or the culprit that is using this access to perform a bunch of DDoS attacks on their enemies or somebody they're trying to hold up, they're often very different parties, and they're often a different party than the person or the criminal that hacked the network in the first place. So there's actually like a little part of the, dark web or whatever you want to call it, that you can essentially just kind of purchase access to things that people hacked.
Yeah. Well, it's a big industry, I understand. I'm not involved in it.
When you talk about it, I mean, these things are billion-dollar industries. They're just not, probably paying taxes in their community, and they probably don't have a nice LinkedIn profile that says the industry they work in. But the money's big, and there's people doing it.
Yeah, just one more topic to finish off with, Brian. So, am I correct, when it comes to personal security, when you're in Starbucks and you're using their general system, I tend, even though the connection to my bank or especially my bank or some other financial institution, even if it's HTTPS, I tend, when I'm in a Starbucks or a general public network situation, especially airports, I don't go to my financial institutions. Am I wise to do that, or if it's over HTTPS, I'm pretty probably secure? There's
a couple problems that, and these I don't want to sound like these particular problems are not as prevalent as some of the other topics we've been talking about. But should you trust a public Wi-Fi? That's a kind of a core problem. And the answer
if you're going to a site that's using HTTPS.
Well, okay, but there's a problem with, what is HTTPS to what? And there's you type in gmail.com and it's going to get resolved, and it's going to be this server that Google hosts, right? Well, all of the methodology for how that lookup happens, originally starts by having some sort of trust with the network that you're on, okay? Oh. And if I'm a criminal and I sit down at a Starbucks and I host a little public Wi-Fi that I call free Starbucks Wi-Fi, people in that Starbucks, some of them will connect to it, and they won't think twice about it. And maybe I'm not going to be legitimate with sending people to Gmail. Maybe I'm going to send them to my fake Gmail that I'm hosting, so that when they log in, I'm going to phish their credentials. Or when they go to their, Citibank.com, maybe I'm not going to route them to Citibank. I'm going to route them to this other site that I made that looks a lot like Citibank to kind of phish their credentials. So
I'm right to be not to go to my important financial institutions on a public network.
Well, there's definitely things that people can do to be more secure, and one of them is you can use a VPN, right? So, have a virtual encrypted tunnel from point A to point B, and that, bad guy is going to have a hard time making heads or tails of that.
Would that include the government, or do the government?
Well, they're still going to have access to everything. Yeah. I just assume that multiple governments have probably.
Well, the reason why I mention that is that when it comes to the criminal networks, the two most powerful people. Well, just to finish off this conversation, where people tend to go wrong, I feel, is that these criminal networks that we've discussed are highly financed, professional, and they tend to employ some of the, and I'm not trying to point out a certain race or, but it is reality. They tend to employ some of the best people from Eastern Europe who tend to be some of the best computer programmers and IT professionals in the world as well. They tend, because they pay very, very well, and these are kind of professional criminal organizations, aren't they? And they tend to have very similar resource levels to some state players, don't they?
Well, sometimes they are state players, and there's a lot of some of these criminal syndicates are state sponsored. Places like North Korea, Iran, where if you're in North Korea, are you going to get in trouble for hacking an American company and stealing a bunch of Bitcoins? You're going to get either celebrated like a hero, but you probably didn't even do it as a goof. You did it because you probably get your paycheck from the government.
Yeah.
And their resources continue to increase when billions and billions of dollars of ransoms get paid. That money gets reinvested in more hackers and more exploits and more servers. And, so again, the problem continues to get bigger, and it'll get worse before it gets better.
Well, I think we'll finish our conversation on that happy note, Brian. But it is just reality, isn't it? We'll be back next week, folks, with another great guest like Brian, discussing an interesting topic that will affect you or your clients. We'll be back next week, folks. Bye.